I'm 67 years old, and the most dangerous thing I ever learned was how to wait, not react, not argue, not explode, just wait. Because when you're young, you think power is loud. You think it's shouting, slamming doors, proving a point. But at some point, you realize something else. The quiet man in the room is usually the one who already knows how this ends. That night, Tuesday, October, my wife walked through the front door at exactly 11:04 p.m. She smelled like whiskey and something else I couldn't quite place. She looked at me, not guilty, not nervous, confident, like someone who believed she still had control. And then she said it, calm, clear, practiced. I slept with Craig, my boss. She waited, because she expected something. Anger, shock, pain, a reaction she could measure, a reaction she could win. But I didn't give her that. I just sat there, finished my soup, and let the silence do the work. Because what she didn't know, standing there in that kitchen, smiling like she had just taken something from me, was this. I had already seen it coming. Not that night, not that week, months ago. And by the time she said those words, there was nothing left for her to take. From the outside, our life looked clean. A quiet street, a well-kept house, neighbors who waved, but never really saw you. 31 years of marriage, 2 kids grown, a business we built together from nothing. If you stood on that street long enough, you'd think we were the kind of people who had it figured out. But here's the truth no one sees. The most dangerous problems don't arrive loud. They settle in slowly, and by the time you notice, they've already taken root. That night didn't start at 11:04. It started long before that. But 11:04 p.m., that's when she chose to say it out loud. The front door opened slow, not rushed, not nervous, deliberate, like she had already played this moment in her head more than once. Her heels hit the floor, one step at a time, echoing through the kitchen like they were meant to be heard. I didn't look up right away. I already knew, not the details, but the direction. There's a certain energy people carry when they've already crossed a line, and she walked in with it. She stopped across from me, didn't sit down, didn't hesitate, just leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching me like I was part of the scene she was about to perform. You know what happened today. Not a question. A setup. I lifted my eyes. Calm. Measured. I assume it wasn't good, since you ignored my calls all day. A flicker crossed her face. Just for a second. Then it disappeared. Replaced by something else. Confidence. Control. I had a one-night stand. She paused. Not because she needed to, but because she wanted me to feel it. With Craig. Another pause. My boss. Silence filled the room. Not awkward. Heavy. Calculated. She was waiting. Waiting for the reaction she had already imagined. Anger. Shock. Something she could push against. Something she could win. Because if I broke, she still had power. That's what this was about. Not the affair. Control. But here's the part she didn't understand. Standing there, watching me, thinking she had just taken something from me. This moment, this exact moment, was already accounted for. And by the time she said those words, the outcome was already decided. She expected an explosion, a plate hitting the wall, a voice raised. 31 years breaking in one loud moment. That's what most people do. They react. They give the other person something to push against, something to measure, something to control. But I didn't give her that. I picked my spoon back up, took another bite, let the silence stretch, long enough to make her uncomfortable. Because silence, used correctly, isn't weakness. It's pressure. I could feel her watching me, waiting, trying to figure out what I was about to do. But I had already decided something. Long before that night, I wasn't going to perform for her. Not anymore. Not anger. Not pain. Not even disappointment. Because the moment you show emotion to someone who's already crossed the line, you hand them the last piece of control they have left. And I was done doing that. When she finally walked upstairs, confused, maybe even irritated, I didn't follow. I finished the soup. Every last spoonful. Washed the bowl. Dried it. Put it back exactly where it belonged. Routine matters, especially when everything else is breaking. Then I stepped outside. The air was cold. Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes everything feel sharper. I walked to the garage. Got into my truck. Closed the door. And for the first time that night, il était hitme. Not all at once. Not uncontrollably. I gave myself a limit. 4 minutes. That's it. 4 minutes to feel everything I wasn't going to show her. Anger. Disgust. The realization that the life I had built was already gone. Not because of what she said that night, but because of what she had been doing long before it. The timer in my head ran out. And when it did, I didn't feel better. I felt clear. Because once emotion runs out, all that's left is what matters. What you do next. That night wasn't the beginning. It just made everything undeniable. Because the truth is, I had been noticing things for a long time. Not big things. Not obvious things. Small shifts. The kind most people ignore because they don't want to be right. Late nights that didn't match the stories. Calls that ended too quickly when I walked into the room. A new tone in her voice. Lighter, but not for me. And then there was the silence. Not peaceful silence. Not the kind that comes from comfort. This was different. Deliberate. Like she had already started living somewhere else. And just hadn't moved her things yet. You don't confront that right away. That's the mistake people make. They see something and immediately react. They ask questions too early. They show their hand. And once you do that, it was a Wednesday. Late summer, nothing dramatic about it. Just lunch with an old friend. The kind of meeting you've had 100 times before, until the day it becomes something else. We sat across from each other. Sam table. Sam routine. Different conversation. He looked at me for a while, like he was trying to decide how honest he should be. Then he asked it. You think she's seeing someone else? Not emotional. Not shocked. Just direct. I didn't answer right away. I stirred my coffee, watched it spin. Because once you say something like that out loud, you can't take it back. I think, I said slowly, she's been somewhere else for a long time. He leaned back. Let that sit. Didn't interrupt. Didn't try to fix it. Good friends don't rush moments like that. They let you walk into them on your own. So what are you going to do? That's the question people always ask. And most people answer it wrong. They say, I'll confront her. I'll ask for the truth. I'll fix it. I didn't say any of that, because by that point, I already understood something most people learn too late. You don't win by reacting. You win by positioning. I'm going to find out for sure, I said. He nodded. That part made sense. But then I added the part he didn't expect. And then, I'm going to make sure. I paused. Not for effect. For accuracy. That when I leave. I looked him in the eye. I leave clean. He frowned slightly. Not because he disagreed. Because he didn't fully understand. Clean doesn't mean painless. It doesn't mean easy. It means controlled. No loose ends. No surprise. No one holding anything over you when it's done. He studied me for a moment longer, then asked one more question. How long have you been thinking about this? I didn't hesitate this time. Long enough, I said quietly, to stop being emotional about it. And that was the moment everything changed. Not the night she confessed. Not the morning I left. This was the moment the decision was made. Everything after that was just execution. The other person adjusts. They hide better. They prepare. They rewrite the story before you even understand it. So I didn't ask. I watched. I listened. I started paying attention to details I used to ignore. Timestamps, patterns, gaps that didn't make sense. Because if something is really wrong, it always leaves a trail. You just have to be patient enough to follow it. And that's the part most people can't do. They want answers immediately. They want relief. But I wasn't looking for relief. I was looking for certainty. Because once you're certain, you don't react. You prepare. And by the time that Tuesday night arrived, sitting there in that kitchen, watching her deliver her perfectly rehearsed confession, I wasn't surprised. Not really. I was just finished pretending I didn't already know where this was going. And more importantly, I already knew what I was going to do about it. 14 months earlier, I walked into a law office on Washington Street. Mid-morning, quiet, the kind of place where nothing looks urgent, but everything matters. I didn't rush, didn't explain too much, just sat down and laid out the situation. Not accusation, not emotions, facts, timelines, behavior changes, financial structure. Because if you walk into a room like that and you lead with feelings, you lose credibility. And I couldn't afford that. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't react, just took notes. That's how you know you're in the right place. People who deal with real problems don't dramatize them. They structure them. What exactly do you want? She asked. Simple question. Most people answer it wrong. They say, I want justice. I want her to pay. But those aren't plans. Those are emotions. And emotions don't hold up in court. I want control, I said. She looked up. Not surprised. Just interested. Control of what? Everything that matters, I replied. The business, the accounts, the future. Because once things break, those are the only things people fight over. She nodded slowly, then said something I'll never forget. If we do this, we do it quietly, and we do it early. That was the moment the timeline shifted. Not reacting to a problem, but getting ahead of it. Over the next few months, we didn't make noise. We made changes. Small ones. Legalones. Invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. Entities restructured. Accounts repositioned. Control reassigned. All documented. All clean. Because the goal wasn't to destroy anything. The goal was to make sure that when the truth finally came out, there would be nothing left to fight over. And the most important part? She had no idea. She came home every night, sat at the same table, lived in the same house, believing everything was still exactly where she left it, that nothing had changed. But underneath, quietly, precisely, everything already had. On paper, nothing changed. Same company name, same structure, same ownership. If anyone had looked at it from the outside, they would have seen exactly what they expected to see. A business, built over years, shared, stable, intact. But the truth was somewhere else. Because real control is never what people think it is. It's not the name on the document. It's not the title. It's not even the percentage. It's where the value actually lives. And that's the part we moved. Quietly, legally, piece by piece. The contracts went first, then the client relationships, then the accounts that actually generated revenue. Nothing rushed, nothing obvious. Each step had a reason. Each move had a paper trail. Because this wasn't about hiding anything. It was about repositioning everything. By the time it was done, the structure still looked the same. But underneath it, the center of gravity had shifted. Completely. She still had her name on the business. Still had her share. Still believed she was part of something valuable. And technically, she was. Just not the part that mattered. What she owned was real, but it wasn't active. It didn't produce. It didn't control. It didn't decide anything. It was a shell, and shells only look strong from the outside. Inside, they're empty. For 6 months, she walked through that house, believing she still had equal ground, still had leverage, still had options. But the reality was already set, not in one big moment, but in dozens of small, deliberate decisions that she never saw. And that's the part people misunderstand. They think power is taken in one move. It's not. It's built quietly, long before anyone realizes it's gone. People confuse ownership with control. They think if their name is on something, they have power over it. They think signatures mean security. They don't. Because ownership is what you see on paper. Control is what actually moves the outcome. And those two things are not always the same. For months, she believed everything was still balanced, that nothing had changed, that whatever we built was still ours, equal, untouched. But she never looked closely enough, because if she had, she would have noticed something small. decisions she no longer made, accounts she didn't fully access, details that didn't quite line up anymore. Nothing obvious, nothing that would trigger alarm, just subtle shifts, the kind you only catch if you're paying attention. And she wasn't, because people who think they're safe stop checking. They stop asking questions. They assume the structure around them is permanent. But structures change, quietly, gradually, until one day, they don't belong to you anymore. She still had ownership. Technically, her name was still there. Her position was still there. But influence? That was gone. Control? Already moved. And the most dangerous part of all was that she didn't feel the loss when it happened. She only felt it later, all at once. Because when control leaves slowly, you don't notice it disappearing. You only notice when you finally need it. And it's not there anymore. Money doesn't disappear. Not if you know what you're doing. It moves. Slowly, carefully, in ways that don't attract attention. Because large changes get noticed. Small ones don't. And small, repeated over time, become everything. I didn't wake up one day and empty an account. That's how people lose cases. That's how people get caught. Instead, it was measured, planned. Each transfer had a reason. Each step had documentation. Nothing rushed. Nothing emotional. Just a series of decisions made long before anyone thought to question them. By the time that Tuesday came around, there was nothing left to scramble. Nothing left to protect. Everything that mattered was already where it needed to be. Not hidden. Not stolen. Positioned. Because there's a difference. When you take something in panic, you leave traces. When you move something with intent, you leave structure. And structure holds. The joint account was the last piece. The one she used every day. The one that made her feel like everything was still normal. That part, I left until the end. Not for drama. For timing. Because the moment someone checks an account and sees something they don't expect, that's when the reality starts to shift. That's when denial ends. By Monday morning, that account was nearly empty. Not zero. Just enough left to make the number undeniable. And when she finally looked at it, really looked, it wouldn't feel like something was missing. It would feel like something had already happened. Something she didn't see. Something she couldn't reverse. Because by the time people think to react, the movement is already complete. And all that's left is the result. The house was quiet. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that feels like something has already ended, even if no one has said it yet. Upstairs, she was asleep. Or pretending to be. It didn't matter. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, looked around at everything we had built, the cabinets we argued over, the table we sat at for years, the small routines that once meant something, and I realized something simple. This place wasn't mine anymore. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. So I didn't hesitate. I walked to the hall closet and pulled out the bags I had packed days earlier. Not in panic. Not in reaction. Prepared. Everything was already there. Clothes. Documents. Anything with my name on it. Only what mattered. Because when you leave like this, you don't take everything. You take control. I moved quietly. One trip at a time. No noise. No mistakes. Just execution. The kind that doesn't leave anything behind by accident. Outside, the air was cold. Sharp. Clean. I loaded the last bag into the truck and closed the door without a sound. Then I stopped. Just for a second. Not to doubt. Not to reconsider. Just to acknowledge it. 31 years. Ending without a word. No confrontation. No explanation. Because some endings don't need to be discussed. They've already happened. At 12:17 inches the morning, I backed out of that driveway. Slow. Controlled. No rush. No hesitation. I didn't look at the house again. Didn't check the windows. Didn't wait for a light to turn on. Because there was nothing left there for me. And more importantly, there was nothing left for me to prove. I turned onto the road and kept driving. Not away from something, but towards something else. A version of my life where I didn't have to pretend anymore. And for the first time in a long time, the silence felt different. Not heavy. Not uncertain. Clear. Because once the decision is made, and the action is taken, there's nothing left to question. Only what comes next. Morning didn't arrive loudly. It never does. It slips in quietly, like nothing has changed. At șapte, 30. She woke up expecting the same routine, the same house, the same rhythm, the same control. She reached for her phone. No message, no missed calls, nothing unusual. Not yet. She walked downstairs. Slow, casual, still inside the version of reality she believed in. And then she stopped, because something was off. Not obvious, just wrong. The kitchen felt different, too quiet, too still, like something had been removed, but she couldn't see what yet. She looked around. The table was clean, the sink empty, no sign of me. That's when the first crack appeared. Not panic, confusion, a small shift in expectation. Jonathan? No answer. She walked through the house, room to room, faster now, not running, but no longer calm, because absence is louder than noise. Then she noticed it. Closet space, empty, drawers, cleared, details she never paid attention to before, suddenly impossible to ignore. That's when confusion turns into something else. Awareness. She grabbed her phone, called, straight to voicemail. Again, some result. Now the silence wasn't just in the house. It was in the response. That's when she moved to the last place people go, when something doesn't make sense. The account. Because numbers don't lie. They confirm. They stabilize. They tell you everything is still where it should be. She logged in, waited, refreshed, looked again, and that's when it hit. Not slowly, all at once. The balance wasn't wrong. It was real, and the reality was simple. What she thought was still there. Wasn't. No warning, no discussion, no negotiation. Just a number that didn't match the life she believed she had. That's the moment everything changes. Not when something ends. By then, she already knew things were bad. But she still believed this was something she could manage. A problem to fix. A situation to control. A story she could rewrite if she moved fast enough. That's what people do. When something breaks, they try to contain it. Call a lawyer. Call a friend. Start building a version of events that puts them back in position. And she did exactly that. But there was one part of this she didn't know existed, because while she was trying to hold things together, something else had already started moving. Outside of her, outside of me. Records don't stay quiet forever. Patterns don't disappear just because no one looks at them. And when enough of them line up, they don't whisper. They surface. A call came in. Not to her. To May, a reporter, calm, professional, asking about transactions. Names she thought were buried. Details she assumed no one had connected. That's the thing about systems. They remember everything. And once someone starts asking the right questions, the story writes itself. I didn't rush, didn't react. I met him. Gave him what was already documented. Nothing exaggerated. Nothing emotional. Just facts. Because facts, I don't need help. And when they finally came out, they didn't come out quietly. Her name, printed, attached to things she couldn't explain away. Not in private, not behind a closed door. Public. That's the difference. Because private problems can be managed. Public ones can't. By the time she realized what was happening, it was already too late to contain. Too late to redirect. Too late to pretend it was something else. Everything she thought she could control was now moving on its own. And for the first time, she wasn't reacting to me. She was reacting to reality. And reality doesn't negotiate. When you realize it already has, people expect an ending to feel like a victory, like something loud, clear, final, but it doesn't work like that. Not when you've lived a life with someone. Not when you've spent decades building something that quietly stopped being real. The divorce didn't explode. It didn't drag. It moved the way everything else had moved. Measured, controlled. I sat in that room, listening to numbers being read, assets divided, accounts finalized, decisions made official. No anger, no accusation, just outcomes. The house sold. The business stayed where it had already been placed. What was left was exactly what had been left for her. Nothing more, nothing hidden, nothing to argue, because there was nothing left to fight over. That's the part people don't understand. They think the end is where the battle happens. It's not. The end is where the result shows up. The real decisions were made long before anyone walked into that room. After it was done, I drove back to that street once. Didn't stop at the house. Didn't need to. Just parked at the corner. Watched the same quiet neighborhood, moving exactly the way it always had. People walking dogs, cars passing by, life continuing, like nothing had changed. And that's when it really settles in. Not the loss, not the anger, something else. Clarity. Because when everything is stripped down, when the noise is gone, you're left with one simple truth. You saw it coming. You prepared. And when the moment arrived, you didn't lose yourself trying to hold on to something that was already gone. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt steady, like a man who measured everything carefully and made the cut exactly where it needed to be. No hesitation, no regret. Odszajzeć, she szepnęła. That was enough. I put the truck in drive, left that street behind me, and didn't look back. Because some chapters don't need revisiting. They just need to end. Clean. She stood there, in that kitchen, holding her phone, looking at a number she couldn't explain. And for the first time, she wasn't in control of the story anymore.